There's a moment that happens every weekend in millions of homes. A game is on, the volume is loud, voices rise, emotions swing wildly over something happening far away. And then there's another room. In that room, someone is calm. They're reading, thinking, scrolling, creating, or simply sitting with their thoughts. They're not angry, they're not bored, they're not trying to be different. They just don't care about the game. And to many people, that feels strange, because sports obsession isn't just entertainment anymore. It's identity, it's belonging, it's ritual. So when someone doesn't obsess over sports, the question isn't usually why, it's what's wrong with them. But psychology tells a very different story. People who don't obsess over sports aren't missing something. They're tuned into something else. From an early age, most societies teach us how to belong. Pick a team, wear the colors, know the stats, celebrate the wins, suffer the losses. Sports become a shortcut to connection. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need deep conversation. You just say, "Did you see the game?" For many people, that's comforting. But for others, it feels empty. Not wrong, not bad, just hollow. Their minds don't light up from scores and standings. Their emotional system doesn't attach to outcomes they can't influence. Psychologically, this often points to internal orientation rather than external stimulation. These people don't regulate emotion through collective excitement. They regulate through meaning. Think about what sports obsession actually does to the brain. Fast movement, unpredictable outcomes, tribal identity, high emotional stakes. It's dopamine heavy, adrenaline rich, socially reinforced. Some brains crave that, others don't. People who don't obsess over sports often have lower reward sensitivity to competitive spectacle. That doesn't mean they feel less. It often means they feel deeper, but toward different things. Ideas, stories, systems, art, human behavior, personal growth. Where others feel alive through external competition, they feel alive through internal exploration. There's also something else happening. Sports obsession offers emotional outsourcing. When your team wins, you feel victorious. When your team loses, you feel defeated. But none of it is personal responsibility. No self-reflection required, no personal risk. People who don't obsess over sports often prefer earned emotion. They want feelings to come from their own effort, choices, and understanding. They'd rather struggle through learning a skill than scream at a screen for someone else's achievement. Not because they're superior, but because their sense of self is built differently. Socially, this creates friction because sports culture is loud, and non-participation feels like rejection. When someone says, "I don't really watch sports," what others hear is, "I don't want to join your tribe." But psychologically, it's rarely about rejection, it's about selective investment. Time feels expensive to them. Attention feels sacred. They're not uninterested in bonding, they're uninterested in bonding over something that doesn't resonate. There's a quiet independence here. People who don't obsess over sports tend to have self-directed identity. They don't borrow emotion from crowds. They don't feel pulled to cheer just to belong. They're comfortable being slightly out of sync. That comfort is not common. It usually comes from early experiences of thinking differently, noticing patterns others ignore, or learning that approval isn't required for meaning. They learned, consciously or not, that excitement doesn't have to be shared to be real. Notice how sports conversations repeat. The same debates, the same arguments, the same statistics recycled endlessly. For some minds, repetition is bonding. For others, it's draining. People who don't obsess over sports often crave novelty of thought, not repetition of outcomes. They'd rather explore a new idea than rehash last night's play. Their curiosity points outward and inward, not sideways toward consensus. This doesn't mean they dislike sports fans. In fact, many admire the passion. But admiration doesn't equal identification. They see the emotional investment and think that intensity could be used elsewhere, not better, elsewhere, toward building, understanding, creating. They're often more process-oriented than outcome-oriented. They care less about winning and more about why things work. There's also a deeper psychological layer. Sports obsession often functions as emotional permission. It allows grown adults to feel anger, joy, despair, and hope loudly and publicly. For people who don't obsess over sports, emotional permission doesn't need an external excuse. They already feel deeply, privately, continuously. They don't need a game to unlock emotion, so the spectacle feels unnecessary. Culturally, this group is often mislabeled: boring, detached, too serious. But watch them closely. They're not disengaged from life. They're engaged differently. They listen more than they shout. They observe more than they react. They think before they feel, and feel without needing permission. Their inner world is active, even when their outer world is quiet. Interestingly, many people who don't obsess over sports still enjoy movement. They may love walking, swimming, lifting, or solo physical challenges. But competition as entertainment doesn't hook them, because their motivation isn't comparison, it's mastery. They don't ask who's better. They ask, how does this work? How can I improve? What does this teach me? There's also an honesty in them that can be uncomfortable. They won't fake enthusiasm. They won't pretend to care, not out of arrogance, but integrity. They experience authenticity as a psychological need, and forced interest feels like lying. So they opt out quietly. As people age, something interesting happens. Many former sports obsessors slowly drift away. The noise fades, the stakes feel artificial, time feels limited, and suddenly the people who never obsessed make more sense. They were never behind, they were early. They built inner lives instead of external rituals. This doesn't mean sports are bad. It means humans regulate meaning differently. Some need collective emotion, others need personal insight. Some recharge through crowds, others through clarity. Neither is broken, but misunderstanding creates unnecessary division. So when you meet someone who doesn't obsess over sports, don't assume they're disconnected. They may be deeply connected to ideas, to growth, to self-awareness, to a quieter but more stable sense of identity. They don't borrow excitement, they generate meaning. And in a world addicted to noise, that kind of mind often goes unnoticed. But it shouldn't, because while others argue about scores, they're often asking questions that last much longer.